I'm Jim, and I'm not Garrett. And this is Jim and Garrett at the Movies. This is our Best of the Year 2018 list. I wanted to get this video out before the Oscar nominations come out. As of this recording, the Oscar nominations come out in a couple days. And so before that time, I wanted to let you know what I thought were the best of the year. Some of these films we have reviewed on this channel, so I'll probably be referring to those reviews. Before we get started, I wanted to talk a little bit generally about the year in film, year 2018 in film. How was it? What was good? What was not so good? Um, I think overall, 2018 was a mediocre year for films. There were a few good films. There were a few great films, a lot of good films, but there were also a lot of bad films and a lot of mediocre. I think the average was down from last year, at least in my own estimation of movies. Box office returns were up. Uh, Tickets sold was up, so it was a good year at the box office and for the studios. But in terms of quality, I could go with. I wish it was a little bit better. The Oscar nominations, I predict, are going to be a little bit disappointing, at least for my taste in film. We will be nominating movies like Green Book and Star is Born, which is a solid film. Didn't make my top 7 list. But we'll also be nominating films like Bohemian Rhapsody, and we'll probably be ignoring Toni Collette's fantastic performance in Hereditary. I think that one will be one of the snubs that will most bother me when the Oscar nominations come out. So I will be giving you my top 7. I know some channels do top 10, but that's too much, and some channels do top 5. That's too little. Top 7, that's where it's at. So, welcome to Jim and Garrett and the Movies, where we respect the prime numbers. Yes, I'm aware that 5 is a prime number as well. So, let's start with number 7. Number 7 for me is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is one of the most visually interesting films of the year. The animation style is frenetic. It's a crazy film. Most of the time, as I was watching this movie, I wished that my theater seat had a seatbelt. It was an incredible experience. And what is more, it's Miles Morales' story. This is the first time that we've seen Miles Morales Spider-Man on a major studio release, and this film nailed it. It uses the supporting characters perfectly. It perfectly puts them to the side when necessary, when it's time for Miles' story, but it also uses those supporting characters as excellent comic relief. I think that one of the things I'll remember most about 2018 is Nicolas Cage's performance as the noir Spider-Man voice performance. It was perfect. It was perfect casting and perfectly done by Nicolas Cage. This is what's great about this film is that it's visually interesting and it stays focused on the right story, Miles Morales' story. That's why it's in my number 7. Number 6, sticking with the superhero genre, is Black Panther. So there are some issues with this film. I think that its story is pretty predictable because it follows that Marvel 3-act structure perfectly. Any Marvel film that you've seen the story beats in Black Panther. Yet, the themes in this film, what it does in the interstitial spaces between those predictable story beats is fascinating. This is a film that's really exploring race relation issues surrounding the African diaspora, surrounding the necessity, like the ethical necessities that people in power have towards those who are disenfranchised. It's asking and exploring those questions, which is things that other Marvel movies didn't even come close to doing. This is why Ryan Coogler has hit this one out of the park for me. Yes, its CGI is problematic, but this is my favorite movie of the MCU because it takes the MCU story beats, it follows them where it's necessary, but it also thematically transcends them, and that's why I like Black Panther. That's why it's a 4-star film in my view, and one of the top 7 of the year. Number 5, Black Klansman. We reviewed Black Klansman on this channel. I remember talking about how I thought that it might be too polemic for some audiences. I am not those audiences that it's too polemic for. I enjoyed it immensely. This is a perfect blend of comedy and drama. As a whole, I think this film, as I've thought more and more about this, I think Spike Lee is condemning our lack of progress. And that is an incredibly powerful reflection to leave the theater with a film set in the 1970s and yet still having so much to say about how little we've progressed in race relations in America. That's why I like Black Klansman enough to be my number 5 film of the year. Number 4, Searching. Another film that we reviewed here on the podcast. I love a good mystery. This is the best mystery of the year, bar none. But what's more is this is a film that takes place strictly on a father's computer screen as he searches for his missing daughter. And at first, I thought that this was just a gimmick, that this gimmick wouldn't work, but instead, it's inventive filmmaking. It's one of the most inventive films of the year. It's one of the most surprising films of the year because it makes that gimmick, which work, and in fact transcends it to become really powerful and creative storytelling. That's why I like Searching. It also features a strong central performance by John Cho, who carries this movie. I like Searching quite a bit. It's a 4-star film. Now it's on to the 5 stars. Number 3, Won't You Be My Neighbor? I'm not the only one that Won't You Be My Neighbor strongly affected emotionally. I think there were a lot of tales of people leaving the theater in tears after Won't You Be My Neighbor. I'm not ashamed to say one of them. My theater was crying, and it was a really cathartic emotional experience to watch this movie. It takes a look at the work of Fred Rogers, and it becomes a sort of laudatory documentary about his life and about what he stood for and who he is and what he represents. Um, and as I thought more about this movie, the thing that the thing that I came away with was, why was I so emotional? And it seems to be that Fred Rogers represents the absolute apotheosis of human kindness and human decency. He represents, and he behaved and acted as though he was a man who was purely kind and generous. And this film perfectly captures who he was, and it ends up promoting that ideology. So why was I so affected by it? Because when we go out into our day-to-day lives, the things that Fred Rogers represented are so rare. And it's almost, we're crying almost out of the tragedy that what we see in this film is not what we see in real life. And that is what's most sad about watching this film, but also what's most inspiring. Because there are very few films that could actually inspire one to be a better person. Won't You Be My Neighbor is one of those movies. Number 2, Eighth Grade. This almost vied for my number 1 spot, but eventually I decided upon something else. Eighth Grade is one of the 2 films that I've ever seen that made me feel like I was a kid again. And that's not always a good thing, especially when you tell the tale that Eighth Grade does. This is about a girl in 8th grade. It's the tale of her last week in 8th grade, and she struggles with universal questions about how we should relate to other people, our place in the world, our belonging in the world. Those intimate and really difficult questions to wrestle with are normally in movies placed in the person, in the protagonist of a straight white male. But here, Bo Burnham places those same universal and difficult questions in the eyes of a child, and it works. It works on every level. The acting by Elsie Fisher is absolutely amazing in this film. The direction by Bo Burnham. It feels like it's not a film by a first-time director, yet it is. Bo Burnham has an eye for detail that I found absolutely astonishing. This film is not a film to watch with your parents, but I watched it with my parents and it was uncomfortable, but it was also an amazing piece of art. And I really wish that this would get more Oscar buzz than it's currently receiving. It'll have to settle for number 2 on my list because number 1 was a film that really kicked my ass. But before I mention number 1, a few honorable mentions of the year. The first 2 honorable mentions I want to talk about are Sorry to Bother You and Blindspotting. Both of these are excellent films. Both of them also have some issues, structural issues and story issues, but thematically they're really interesting and they deserve a lot more attention than they got. Another film that deserves a lot more attention than it got is The Rider. This is a really intimate tale about a rodeo rider who has to give up what he loves after after a traumatic brain injury. This is a film that's directed by Chloe Zhao, and it stars all non-actors. One of the non-actors could probably use a few acting classes, but in most cases this works very well and lends the film a great deal of authenticity. It's a film that requires a lot of patience, but ultimately I was really satisfied by it and it deserves an honorable mention. Another honorable mention, this is a documentary that was really good, Three Identical Strangers. In the first act, 3 twins meet each other after never having known each other their entire lives. And that's just the first act. The second and third act have a lot of surprises and a lot of interesting things that I don't want to spoil, but it's definitely worth your time. Finally, this is the most heartwarming film of the year for me. It was Hearts Beat Loud, starring Nick Offerman. I challenge you to watch this film and not be singing and dancing along with the title song at the end of it. I really enjoyed Hearts Beat Loud. It's a nice little intimate tale about fathers and daughters, and it really worked for me. I liked Hearts Beat Loud, although it's sort of aiming lower than some of the other films that actually made the list. The award for most movie goes to Avengers Infinity War, probably also the most rewatchable film of all of the year. This was an exciting, draining, heart-pounding film that I've ended up rewatching far more than I would ever like to admit. I really enjoyed Avengers Infinity War, but it fell on the 3.5 out of 5 scale for me and was beat out by its other MCU component, Black Panther. But now it's time for the drum roll. I'm not actually going to do a drum roll. Annihilation is my number 1 film of the year. Writer-director Alex Garland adapts James Vandermeer's book of the same name. Stars Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Oscar Isaac. This is a phenomenal film. It works as an A to B thriller story mystery, but it has much more to offer when you start taking the film apart metaphorically. I highly recommend Dan Olson's video on his Folding Ideas channel. Go check out that. It's great film criticism because it makes you love the movie more. And damn did I love this movie when I walked out of it, and I loved it even more after I listened to that critique. This is a film that its ideas are so devastatingly interesting. It's about biological determinism, about whether our tendencies are written into our DNA. It's also about the pains that we carry and how that pain lives on and how that pain changes who we are as people. It's about our relationships with one another. There are some deeply interesting and universal themes being explored in this movie. This is a film that I've seen twice, and it's a film that I can't wait to see again. It's a gift that keeps on giving because there are layers to this movie. It's a film that I want to unpack forever. I really enjoyed this film. And I saw it in February when it first came out in the theaters, and I realized that that was the bar that every film that I had to see for the rest of the year. That was the bar that it had to jump over. Only Eighth Grade came close. Everything else sort of fell short of how I felt after watching Annihilation. It is one of the most profound and interesting movies of the year, and this is a film that I think people will look back on 2018 and say, we should have loved that movie more. By far, one of the most interesting and engaging, thought provoking movies. And that's what I really go to the cinema to look for. I really go to the cinema to see how is this going to challenge me intellectually and emotionally. And nothing did that as well as Annihilation. So, that's my list of the top 7 films of the year, with enough honorable mentions to sort of expand it. I look forward to let us know what you think in the comments below. What were your top 7 movies of the year? Don't give us your top 10. Don't give us your top 5. Give us your top 7. I will be back with Garrett next episode, and we will be talking about more films, the 2019 films. We'll also be reviewing other films in our movie club section, and of course, we'll be talking about all the latest film news, including the Oscar nominations as they come out. We'll look forward to seeing you then. I'm Jim, and this has been Jim and Garrett at the Movies. Good night.